Hey there! Welcome to episode 24 of an ongoing series where we basically take the camera anywhere we want and we try to find secrets and new discoveries to some of our favorite games. With that said, let's get going. So just putting it out there right now, a lot of what we're going to be looking at in today's episode is going to be the areas of Pokemon Gales of Darkness, because the game's camera restricts you so much and creates such tight boundaries for your character that zooming out and spinning around the camera in all these areas is like a treasure trove. It's amazing how much there is to see outside of the small scope that the game allows you to. Like, for example, the starting area of this game. I think one really cool thing in particular is that the rooms that you can see from outside the window are actually replicated rooms that are inside the building. So I found Adon very early on in the game hiding underneath a desk because he's playing hide and seek with Jovi. But I also noticed that Adon's a lot different looking than all the other scientists. And there's just something off about him. I can't quite put my finger on what. So next up is Cominco Slab, and right off the bat, you can see that there's a road here that you wouldn't be able to see. It's pretty much at this point where I came to the realization that Pokemon Gales of Darkness was at the very least supposed to have a rotating camera, because there's so much that you can't see simply because the camera is locked in a fixed position, much like how the Pokemon games of old used to be. But you know what, before we get into that, let's meet Chobin. Chobin's really interesting because when you look behind his glasses, you can see that he has little black eyes. But inside battle, it's an entirely different story. Once you beat him there, the glasses come off, and the most disturbing thing about this game, by far, is that his pouty lips are also his eyeballs. Ugh. So now we're at Gideon Port, and what's really interesting about this city is that not only does it have a large, unviewable, massive beach, but when you battle in this city, there's actually some structures that's not even on the actual map, which is really unusual. Because while a lot of areas do look a little bit different from the battle version to the map version, there usually isn't entire man-made structures built in. Now this kind of caught me off guard. I wasn't really expecting anything to be on the other side of this room, but when I turned the camera around, it was all the textures that were inside this room plastered into one spot. Now, I can't explain this whatsoever. I've never really seen this in any other game that I covered, but what's really odd is that this isn't just an isolated case. This happens periodically throughout Pokemon XD. Now, it's not in every room and city, but from time to time, you will see its textures on some type of object in an area that's off camera. And here's another piece of evidence towards the rotating camera theory. Again, when you zoom out the camera, you can see that there's Cliffside that actually wraps itself around from 6 o'clock to 3 o'clock. And the massive land that expands past the platform in which you purify your Pokemon is really expansive. But we're not done yet. You know, I gotta say, Mount Battle is a very impressive location. For what little you see in the actual entrance, there's a lot of attention to detail. For example, this valley that leads all the way up into the mountain, and then the mountain itself is actually transparent, and it does that to give the player a sense that it's getting lost in the clouds. And then once you're on Mount Battle, oh, what a beautiful sight. So there's supposed to be 100 platforms apparently. I didn't actually get that far, but what's first to render is 13 platforms. And as you can see, the scope of this gorge is just incredible. I can't believe they tried to hide it from us. So this is actually kind of adorable. Chief Cheryl's over here is always sitting behind his desk, but if you turn the camera around to behind his desk, you can see that he's tapping his foot to the tempo of the song being played. Not convinced? Yeah, alright, no problem. We'll just speed up the game by 300% and see how it matches then. Here's a fun little tidbit. A lot of the characters in this game have sunglasses, but many of them have no eyes underneath. Now, Chobin was a rare exception to this rule, and so is the fortune teller. If we remove the glasses from the fortune teller outright, she actually has pretty well detailed eyes underneath, and an imprint of where her glasses should be. I guess she's just been wearing them a little too long. Alright, well, because we're in the newsroom, I was hoping that I'd find something interesting by moving the camera around here, but I wasn't expecting this. So when you get the camera behind the desk, the news reporter actually is standing through the chair. And through the ground! This is so odd. I mean, she's sitting throughout most of the game. You'd think that they would just position her to be in a sitting position. Alright, well, I mean, like, I guess if you're confident that the player will never see behind that desk, this is probably a little easier. You know, I just realized I'm covering a Pokemon episode, and I haven't really covered any Pokemon. So how about that? And while we don't have very many boundary-breaking secrets as far as the Pokemon themselves, there are one or two things I can show off. For example, hardcore Ralts fans will tell you that, yes, he always does have eyes underneath his, hair? I think it's hair. But in a game like Pokemon Gales of Darkness, you never get an opportunity to see his eyes, unless he's wincing and taking damage. But what's really interesting is that his eyes are actually textured and open when he's in a neutral position. Again, there was just no point in actually going through this effort, so it's really interesting to see that it's there. Wow, that's pretty. And this is even prettier. Now here is my dilemma, viewer. I'm trying not to sound like a broken record here, but every area in this game has so much to look at. Although this area in particular is actually really interesting because the platform actually has half an orb modeled underneath it, which is really cool. But what's also interesting is that in the distance there's this nice channel that goes all the way down. And oddly enough, that channel is also mirrored on the opposite side, despite the fact that that's the way you're supposed to leave. Maybe our main character is supposed to swim? So now it's time to look at the map, and what's really interesting about this is that we're actually only looking at 1/4 of the entire thing. When we zoom it out, we can actually see that there's other terrains, like this valley all the way in the back. But what's really cool as well is that the last area of the game has its own marker, despite the fact that you're never going to be able to see it. And you know what? It really makes you wonder what their intention here was, because you can see all this stuff. And you can just tell that the developers put a lot of effort into this map. So it makes you really wonder, how expansive did they really want this to be? And now we're checking out FedEx City, and oh man, the environments in this game gets better and better as you go further into it. But what's really cool about this city in particular is that as you zoom out the map, you can see that there's just some weird lines that come out of the city. Now here's one of the battle areas for one of the Colosseums, and it's massive. My goodness, man. There's just an absurd amount of detail that really just does not even need to be there. As we zoom out the camera, you can see that there's just all sorts of interesting structures that surround this arena. And what's really interesting is that there's holes where the button of the Pokeball should be. But as far as I can see, they were never utilized for anything. And of course, what kind of person would I be if I didn't show off what the audience looks like up close? How about it, Pokemon fans? You recognize anybody? And the last thing we're going to be looking at today is Real Gam Tower. Now this is actually really cool because Real Gam Tower has quadrants on the east, west, and north. And it plays a little cutscene when your character's using a little tram. But if we zoom the camera out, it turns out that this area is fully rendered. And this just came as a shock to me because the camera is zoomed in so close during these cutscenes that you just assume there'd be a lot of culling. But no. Pokemon XD, you were full of surprises, I have to admit.
I guess you could say it was a real snore, Lex.
You don't have to play down the episode like that.
I'm sorry, I haven't seen it yet.
Thank you guys so much for watching. This month is going to be Halloween month. Getting some spooky action up on this channel. So you got a choice between Resident Evil 4, and let's be honest, that's probably going to win unless we get a whole bunch of hardcore GameCube gamers on the polls this week. And it's underdog competitor, Eternal Darkness. So, and I don't know why I'm doing this, I'm not going to edit in Eternal Darkness into my hands. Thank you again, Michael Chin, for doing another amazing intro. He actually suggested that I just work him into the outro credits, and I agree. I think that it shouldn't just be all about she says. It's not about me, Pat. It's about the people involved, like you.
Like me?
Like you.
Couldn't be.
But it is. So, anyways, expect to see a little credit for him at the end of this episode. So with that said, I got nothing else to say, so let's just say it and be done with it and go home. I'll see you later. Bye.
Don't be marowacking with my heart, Derek.
Tell me about the whistles.
The whistles go. You know what I'm saying?